Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Tim. Thank you for, this is where I get it. Thank you for your leadership and friendship. Tim is a friend. Before I was Prime Minister, I wasn't his friend, now I'm his friend. It's amazing. It's amazing. But no, Tim and Susan Smith, Tom Pitfield, your leadership of Canada 2020 over the years. We first came, Dinah, when we first came to Ottawa, God, 20 years ago. And you joined Canada 2020 and helped define the Canada we want in 2020. Yeah. Didn't include COVID, didn't include a few things, but much of that was built out, and now we have an agenda going forward. I'd like to thank the organizers. I'd like to thank Global Progress, the Center for American Progress, which is part of Global Progress, just to be clear. American Progress is part of Global Progress. Johan, thank you. Tireless work, energy. I'm going to give a shout out, I think appropriately, to Matt Brown for his leadership over the years. Yeah. I mean, this is a remarkable group of people that you brought together, and much of good of what has happened in the world has sprung from the individuals and the organizations around here. Just before going into detail in my remarks, and if you have somewhere else to go and you understand French, you can listen for the next few sentences and go off and enjoy Toronto. Aujourd'hui, je veux vous parler de la rupture dans le monde. Notre réponse à l'heure actuelle doit être de résister à toute tentation de préserver ou de restaurer des éléments du passé. Nous préférons, ici au Canada, de bâtir à nouveau. De nouvelles infrastructures, de nouveaux parlements, de nouveaux systèmes énergétiques, de nouvelles relations commerciales et de nouvelles institutions. Voilà ce que pourrait être la nouvelle politique progressiste. Now, across all our countries, I think this is safe to say, across all our countries, the same conversation is taking place at kitchen tables and factory floors and chat rooms, people feeling a loss of control. It's a conversation that's been going on for a few years. Control or loss of control over their cost of living. Loss of control over who comes across their borders. Loss of control, as we've just heard, over what enters their social media feed. Control or loss thereof of a technology that may displace, destroy their jobs before it improves their lives. Control in a world that's more divided and dangerous by the day. And that loss of agency, control, is the common thread through all our politics. It doesn't respect ideology, it doesn't respect the old left-right map. And it has fed a politics of grievance, one that thrives on scarcity, feeds on division, and promises strength through demolition. And it won't be addressed by the old ways. And just as Marshall McLuhan, that's my necessary Canadian reference, Marshall McLuhan, described 60 years ago, our age of anxiety is caused by trying to do today's job with yesterday's tools and yesterday's concepts. And I thought that was one of President Obama's main points last evening, a fascinating conversation, point that we need new institutions as much as reimagining the old ones. And that was part of my argument at Davos, that the international rules-based order that we helped build together no longer works as it once claimed, that we cannot restore that which no longer holds, that nostalgia is not a strategy. We have to take the sign down and build anew. So with this context, what I want to do in my time is, actually, it'll extend beyond my time. Sorry, just kidding, don't worry. What I want to do is say a few words about what we're doing in Canada. And I'm not going to claim that we have all the answers, not least because we have a federal system and there are many fundamental roles of government, particularly in healthcare and education, for which we're not directly responsible. But even though given that, and even though we're just getting started, I believe there are some of the broader lessons for all of us. So, and part of that, consistent with what I just said and said in Davos, is part of the way forward is to name plainly what's broken, to say as plainly as possible how we intend to replace it, and then do the hard work of building. And I'm going to provide a few examples. Housing is unaffordable in part because we haven't been building affordable housing. I mean, it's not a tautology. We literally have not been building in this country. As Mike Moffat knows, we haven't built affordable housing for about 30 years as a class. So what we're doing, and it's not all the answer, but it's part of the answer, is to look to build affordable housing on a scale and speed not seen in generations. And by the way, if you haven't been building affordable housing for 30 years, it's pretty easy to meet that bar. It's a low bar. We have a higher bar than that. But we've created a new public agency, Build Canada Homes, that targets deeply affordable housing. That means transition housing for homeless, all the way up the continuum to mixed income developments. Very importantly, a variety of levers for that, including taking the very large federal land bank and making it available. We're looking to double the pace of affordable housing construction using factory technologies familiar to many of you from Europe, using, of course, Canadian lumber and Canadian workers, cut building times in half, reduce costs, and reduce embedded and operating emissions each by 20%. We're also working with the provinces, because there's a housing crisis right now, and municipalities to cut what are called development charges. If you're Mike Moffat and you're in Honor's Twitter feed, you'll know what this means, because he talks about it incessantly, quite rightly. Development charges. We're working with them to cut those in half and to cut taxes on new home purchases. So what does that mean? Translate that right here in Toronto, across Ontario, but here in Toronto, that is a savings now, as I speak today, on new homes of up to $200,000. That's affordability. Second example. The truth is that building energy systems that are cleaner, more abundant and affordable won't just happen. And in Canada, we need to remind ourselves of that, because we start from a very enviable position. We have the second lowest energy costs delivered on the retail side and for industrials in the OECD. More than 80% of the power generated in the country is zero emission. But like many others, we need to double the scale of that grid over the course of the next 2 decades. That will require massive investment, the linking of provincial systems, they're all islands. It'll require spreading the costs of that generation over time, using our AAA balance sheet so that ratepayers today, who are being crushed by affordability concerns, don't pay all the costs of those investments that will benefit all our citizens and all generations over time, and the planet, of course, over decades. This is one of the big reasons why we have to do permitting reform, regulatory reform in Canada. It is an essential reason, apart from fundamental reasons of justice, why we need new partnerships with Indigenous peoples. And we need a willingness, this can be sometimes hard to accept, we need a willingness to use all sources of energy, including some gas, and all technologies beyond conventional renewables, certainly to nuclear, hydro, small modular reactors, carbon capture, and geothermal. That combination will ensure reliability and affordability and dramatically slash emissions across the entire economy. That is the point. That is the objective. And I'll just put some numbers on this. You can't get away without some numbers from me, I'm sorry. Our current grid, all of that generation across the country, largely clean, emits just under 50 megatons a year. The emissions of heavy industry, transportation, buildings in Canada is about 525 megatons a year. The biggest prize is reducing emissions affordably through electrification rather than purity in generation. Third, we need to build new trade relationships in order to move from reliance to resilience. And it's truth that Canada has long benefited long benefited, and we are very grateful. We have long benefited, we did say thank you, long benefited from our proximity to the world's largest and the world's most dynamic economy. But as the U.S. changes dramatically its policies, and that's the right of the United States, as it changes those policies, many of our former strengths have become our vulnerabilities. We still, to be clear, we still have the best trade deal with the United States. Over 85% of our goods move tariff-free across the border. But with American tariffs, so-called 232 or strategic tariffs on autos, steel, aluminum, forest products, I could go on, but in these so-called strategic areas, those are creating deep challenges for our workers and firms in those industries, industries that until now had been highly, highly integrated with the United States to the benefit of America as well as Canada. And our response begins by reimagining aspects of North American integration. And to be absolutely clear, Canada, like Mexico, Canada remains open to deeper integration, including options for Fortress North America in selected sectors. And to be clear, those offers are on the table. But if that route is not ultimately possible, we will invest heavily in new markets and products. We'll reward those who build, buy, and produce in Canada, and we will build new partnerships abroad. We're already applying the main lessons of the past 18 months, that we must build our strategic autonomy. Now, that starts with meeting our NATO obligations. Meeting our NATO obligations, and it has to be said, for the first time since the fall of the Berlin Wall. We are in the process, beyond that, moving forward, of catalyzing $500 billion of investment in defense and security and resilience over the next decade. But it means more than that. Building strategic autonomy means more than defense and security. It means building new, reliable partnerships abroad. We've signed in the last year 20 new economic and security agreements across 5 continents. We're on track to conclude major trade agreements this year with India, with ASEAN and Mercosur. And the early results of this strategy are encouraging. Non-U.S. exports are up sharply. We're on track to double them this decade. Foreign investment in Canada is at its highest in 2 decades, and it's running more than twice the rate, adjusted for the size of our economy, of all other G7 economies. And we're making this progress. We're making this progress because Canada is blessed with what the world wants, from energy to critical minerals, from aerospace to AI. We're making this progress because we have the values to which much of the world aspires, including commitments to sustainability, the rule of law, the belief that openness brings strength and mutual benefit. And we're making this progress in part because we've recognized, in some cases before others, the degree to which in the new world sovereignty requires more than a country just being able to feed, fuel, and defend itself, as important as that is. It requires access to those critical minerals, to space-based communications, to sovereign cloud, AI, payment systems, clean energy, and vaccines. And all of that demands partnership. And there's no one-stop shop for that partnership. We need a variable geometry, a dense web of partnerships across those core strategic capabilities and issues, drawing on common values and interests, because it's those common values and interests that will assure alignment and respect to those agreements. So from the coalition of the willing to support Ukraine, where we're one of the largest per capita contributors, to the G7's Buyers Club for critical minerals, and our AI partnership with India and Australia. For Canada, this also includes being the only non-European country to join SAFE, the European Union's Defence Procurement Initiative, and it includes intensifying defence, security, and economic partnership with the Nordic countries. Now, talking about building partnerships, building directly, but I want to focus on what is just as important as that physical build, which is how we build. We're focused on building sustainably, because reducing emissions is not just a moral duty, it's an economic imperative. So that means those low-carbon homes, low-carbon trade corridors, low-carbon manufacturing, zero-carbon energy. We're building in solidarity with workers. Our focus is on creating good union careers for electricians, welders, carpenters, pipe fitters, the engineers who will build the homes, the ports, the energy systems of this country. 2 weeks ago, we just created something called Team Canada Strong. And it's a soup to nuts. It's not cradle to grave, but 15 to education to job, soup to nuts approach to train up to 100,000 new highly skilled tradespeople over the next 5 years, giving young Canadians a seamless pathway from first job to skills training, internships, qualifications, job placements in a country that will be building for decades. So this is a pathway to a career that we will pay for. We're building inclusively, in close partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. That means free, prior, and informed consent on major projects. It means financing Indigenous ownership in those projects and significant economic benefit in their construction and operation. So when we're building physically, we're building inclusively, sustainably, in solidarity. And as this group has been talking about over the last 24 hours and living in your day jobs, these same values must hold when we build virtually. The question is whether AI certainly will transform our lives, but the question is whether it will improve the lives of all Canadians or benefit only some. Canadians want AI that's safe and sovereign. You just heard from Minister Solomon. AI that creates new economic opportunities, strengthens public services, improves our quality of life. And our AI strategy is about to come out. We'll seek to advance those objectives with modern online safety laws. One of the advantages of being late is we're taking the lessons from others, including Jonathan Haidt's advice that we just saw. We're focused on secure government systems, as others are, sovereign compute, including with partners in Europe and abroad, broad access to AI training and education that represents Canadian voices, languages, and cultures. Now, building big takes time, and people are feeling the pressures of everyday life, the affordability crisis right now. So what we've been doing in parallel with this is giving Canadians a boost today and a bridge to a better tomorrow. Our first act as government was to cut a series of taxes, including middle-class taxes for 22 million Canadians. In the last few months, we've launched a new groceries and essential benefit worth up to $1,800 for Canadian families that affects 12 million Canadians most in need. Like many others, we've suspended a federal fuel tax for the course of this summer, given the severe price increases. And we've maintained our social safety net, crucially. And that's taken tough decisions. We're reinforcing the soundest fiscal position in the G7 so we can maintain those supports. And despite a tariff war and actual wars, we've reduced our deficit. We've reduced operating spending, so away from transfers to individuals. We've reduced that spending growth, which had been running at 8% a year for 10 years. We've reduced that to 2%. We're including making difficult decisions, reducing 10% of the civil service and 20% of our spending on consultants. We're maintaining the lowest deficit, the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7 while we reinforce our social safety net that includes public health care, public dental care, public pharmacare, public child care. Now, the final imperative I wanted to mention is perhaps the most difficult. It's the most difficult given the extreme uncertainty and immediate pressures people are facing. It's this. We have to take risk. Big risk. We have to take risks again. Because in a crisis, fortune favors the bold. And so what we're doing is to motivate that risk-taking, taking risks as government, but also drawing on Canada's history, on examples, and giving people agency. History is the easy bit. Canada was built by Indigenous peoples and voyageurs who mapped this continent and built trading networks from coast to coast to coast before, with due respect, the Americans had even left St. Louis. Whenever we have something over the Americans, we're going to use it. I'm sorry. After the Second World War, Canadians built new neighborhoods for hundreds of thousands of returning veterans, new universities, the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Trans-Canada Highway, Expo 67, inspiring the world. The point is, we used to build in this country, and we're building again, big, fast, bold. $1 trillion of investment is our target over the course of the next 5 years. Second, we're drawing on examples. I can think of no better one. By the way, if you ever want inspiration, interview an astronaut. Last month, I had the privilege of speaking to the crew of the Integrity, and I asked Canada's astronaut, Jeremy Hansen, about advice for Canadians. And he advised us that we have to be willing to take risks. This is a quote. We have to be willing to take risks, recognize that there'll be setbacks, push through them, because in his words, ultimately know that we are going to persist and we will win. Thirdly, giving people agency. This goes back to taking back control. So in the tariff crisis, and I don't think it's an overstatement to call it a tariff crisis, the response of Canadians has been exceptional. Canadians have been keen to do their bit, effectively, do their bit, buy Canadian, visit their country. So help make that happen. It's clear labeling. It means the government following their example with a buy Canadian policy, which we now have. It means seemingly little things, but incredibly important things. We introduced something called the Canada Strong Pass, which meant cheap rail travel for youth and families, free visits to national parks, museums, exhibitions. Over the course of the summer, we extended it over the holidays in the winter, and now over this summer. Huge increase in domestic tourism and spending, up to, depending on how you measure it, around 20%, paralleled by about a 35% fall in cross-border visits. It means something else as well. We are in the early days of creating a sovereign wealth fund. Now, we're not short of capital in this country. We're not short, as I mentioned earlier, of capital that wants to come in and invest in this country. We are going to create a tremendous amount of wealth in this country through these nation-building projects. That is going to benefit all Canadians. It's going to benefit their children, bigger economy, better jobs. But we also think that Canadians should have a direct access to the wealth that's created. So when those ports get built, when that energy infrastructure gets built, when that critical mineral mine gets built, Canada, Canadians more specifically, take a slice alongside the private sector. The new Canada Strong Fund will invest in major ambitious Canadian projects across energy, infrastructure, mining, agriculture, technology, data centers, right alongside private investors. And so for the first time in our history, Canadians will benefit directly from those economic returns. I'll stop here and I'll just mention two other things. One is, when we built the country, if you know your Canadian history, I mentioned history as a motivator. One of the most iconic projects was the original National Railway, Canadian Pacific Railway, which linked the country together at a time when our sovereignty was threatened, and we needed to link British Columbia on the west to the provinces in central Canada in the east. The federal government did many things to make that happen. It was the right thing to do economically and for sovereignty. All of the returns went to Lord Strathcona and, well, mainly Lord Strathcona, now that I think about it, because if you go across the country, you'll see a lot of things named after Strathcona. It's going to be different this time. We're going to share those benefits, and we're going to allow Canadians, if they have a little bit of money, to put it in alongside. They don't have to, but if they have a little bit of money, they'll put it alongside. They'll get the Government of Canada return. If they want to take it out in the short term, they'll get the bigger return if they leave it in longer term. And I will tell you, from going across the country, that's what Canadians want to do. They want to do their little bit to be part of the solution. Let me conclude. And I'll tell you something you know. I probably told you everything I've said, you know. But, those whose politics is to destroy, to demolish, dismantle, they're not going to change their instincts. This is, in many respects, this is their moment, right? We can't match them by being timid imitations of them. We can't answer them by pining for an old order that's not going to return. And the loss of control that people feel that feeds our age of anxiety, it can only be answered by positive action, by building that which comes next. Through the crack in the bell, as Leonard Cohen said, through the rupture that the light gets in. In this more uncertain world, building for all, actual building, concrete, steel, and code is the new progressive politics. And our message to Canadians right from the start has been reflecting back what we've heard. It's a more dangerous world. We have to take care of ourselves. And as Canadians, we will always take care of each other. Building a country that's not just strong, but good. Not just prosperous, but fair. Not just for some most of the time, but for all Canadians all of the time. Soyons tous pour le Canada, pour un Canada pour tous et pour un monde bâti ensemble. Thank you very much. Thank you for your commitment to Canada. Thank you for letting me this time. Thank you.